Thank you for joining us on At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson with a special edition of At Issue, a full hour with the two candidates for the 17th Congressional District race. We have with us in the first half hour, we have Bobby Schilling, who is the challenger in this particular case, a Republican who comes from the Quad Cities. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And let me describe the district to those who don't know. The 17th Congressional District includes a good portion of the south side of Peoria, most of Pekin. It goes over to the Quad Cities and up to a portion of Rockford. So you have a lot of square mileage to cover.
You betcha.
And I will point out in the second half hour, we will have Congresswoman Cheri Bustos, the incumbent, the Democrat, will be joining us at that time. The same questions will be presented to you as will be presented to the Congresswoman. And I'm using the first 5 questions coming from the Associated Press survey that they wanted to survey Americans as to what were the 5 most important issues. And topping that was health. And so let's talk about Obamacare for just a moment. Let's assume that Obamacare is here to stay. What changes, if any, would you suggest that we make to the Affordable Care Act?
You bet. First and foremost is that, this is the president's signature legislation, and it's not going anywhere. Some folks want to get rid of it, but he's not going to sign off on that. Some of the changes that we need to do would be this, is number one is doctors that are outside of the hospital, if they give charitable care to the least amongst us, they cannot currently write that off. The same with the dentist. So one of the changes that needs to happen is to allow for our doctors and dentists, if they give free health care to the neediest amongst us, is that they're allowed to write that off of their taxes, incentivizing them to give more charitable care. Secondly, we need to have some tort reform on the non-economical damages to patients to make darn sure that we don't have all these frivolous lawsuits that are going on. Allow for companies to compete across state lines to bring in more competition and to bring the pricing down. And then the bill that I did for the veterans, which allows for our veterans to go to any hospital or doctor throughout the United States of America, would be another big fix. Also, HSA accounts, health savings accounts, which incentivize the consumer to be more orientated to what are the prices, rather than turning in a card and say, here's my insurance card, and not care about the pricing. HSA accounts force you to say, hey, how much is this going to cost me? And then can I get a deal by paying upfront for it? So I think those are some of the big fixes to it.
In listening to you, it sounds like you're oriented toward making sure that costs are lowered, because that was the original complaint before the Affordable Care Act was ever even submitted, was that the cost of health care is just too high in America.
Right, and we want people to be able to keep their doctors. We want premiums to drop, and I think that that's the key. But at the same time, we want to make sure each and every American out there can access health care. I'm a big supporter of the community health clinics that are out there. Some on my side of the aisle don't support those, but I fully understand that those are truly an investment into the community. If you can capture something early on with someone who's sick, rather than waiting till 20 years down the road, you can save a lot of money to the taxpayer by doing that.
Let's turn to the number 2 issue on the Associated Press survey, and that is the economy and jobs. What specifically, if you're elected as the representative for the 17th Congressional District, would you suggest to create jobs across the country, but specifically for your district?
One of the things that's really important to do is we've got to take a look at our corporate tax rates. And what I mean by that is currently we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And when you bring that number down to, say, 25%, you've got to eliminate the loopholes that are there for corporations. For example, GE makes $3-4 billion and pays 0 in tax. That's not fair to us middle class and hardworking people out in the country. So that would be something that would be a definite thing to do. Secondly, what we have to do is we have to rein in the overregulation of the EPA, OSHA, and all of these other big government bureaucracies that are out there crushing our economy. Now, let me be clear, is that what we have to do is you've got to have these regulations out there to keep the bad players in check. But when you've got a government that's coming in and bullying and intimidating companies here in the United States of America, it's another incentive when you tax them too much. Think about it this way. If you want less of something, cigarettes, alcohol, what have you, you tax and regulate the heck out of it. Well, that's what's happening with our economy today is we're taxing and regulating the heck out of it, so we're incentivizing more companies to leave the United States of America and leave the Illinois 17th district as far as that goes.
Corporate tax rate is currently 35%, if applied just evenly across the board.
Right, and then you add another 4%, so it brings to 39% on the total. So that's something that needs to be adjusted. But I would not support something to where you drop that down and the loopholes stay there, and then the American taxpayer has to fill in that void. That's not fair to us. I think the key thing is to bring the tax down to 25%, eliminate the loopholes that are there, and that would create a broader base across the board, creating more tax dollars coming into the American economy.
Let me clarify to make sure I understand with regard to these agencies, these governmental agencies that oversee business. How do you want to back off? Because we remember the banks caused the problem back in 2008. I think it's pretty clear that the banks they were instrumental in what happened to our economy. Are you suggesting we not have oversight over companies, or how is that going to work?
No, I would say we definitely have to have oversight of I mean, look at Wall Street. They get bailed out, and then the working poor and the middle class people end up footing the bill for all of that. That's wrong. That's not how it should have happened. We've created a system where we've got what we call too big to fail, to where, they're going to fail, so the taxpayer has to come in. Who was bailing out the little guy when the market was crashing and we were losing, 40, 50% of our retirement plans? There was no one except for ourselves. So we have to have regulation to keep the bad players in check, whether it's the banks, whether it's, business or what have you. But at the same time, we've got to have a government agency that's going to come out there, and rather than come out as a bully and a big boss, come out and work with our American companies and allow for them, if they've got a problem, an issue at their facility, to say, hey, this is a problem, you need to get this corrected, rather than coming in and saying, hey, look, you got 30 days, if you don't have it done, we're going to fine you $250,000. Work with our companies to help them improve and make it safer is what the agencies are set up to do.
Do you have a plan for jobs in the 17th Congressional District?
Yeah, actually, the current position that I hold in Rock Island, Illinois, what we do is we actually come in to what we call targeted employment areas, which means the unemployment rate has to be 1.5 times the national average. Currently, the company that I work for, we've created over 110,000 full-time American jobs since 1994. We've injected about $8 billion into the American economy. I just got it to where my boss, we just got approved to do business here in Illinois. And pretty much most of the Illinois 17th district qualifies for the 1.5 times the national average. Working specifically right here in Peoria with Mayor Jim Ardis. It's a program called EB-5, where you have foreign folks that want to come to the United States of America to live the American dream. They invest with our company, and we loan it to American developers. For example, just right downtown here, we're actually looking at the old theater, a possibility of doing something there. What's nice about programs like this, it's one of the best job creating programs that we have here in the country. But what we're able to do is we can put people to work right away for good, solid union construction jobs. And then also is once the facility is completed, then what we do is we have people that are working in those jobs. So it's a pretty good program. But the key thing here is we've got, just here in the last few months, we've had 3 companies that have either announced that they're leaving the district or they've already left. They've made the decision to go. And just in the Quad City area, there's one. There's a couple up north in Hanover, Illinois, and then also in Freeport, Illinois. And we're talking, several hundred jobs. And, what we have to do is we've got to have a member of Congress who's willing to actually reach out and say, hey, is there anything we can do to keep you here? And then do everything we can to fight to keep those jobs here in our district.
You mentioned the construction jobs. Those are good paying jobs. But what about those people that are in minimum wage jobs? What's your position on the minimum wage?
The thing is that if minimum wage was going to fix the problem, increasing the minimum wage, I think we've increased it just over the last few years 4 times, and Illinois is still going the wrong way. We can talk about minimum wage all we want, But if you don't have jobs, it doesn't matter if minimum wage is $50 per hour if there's no jobs. So this is all about the economy. This is all about making Illinois to where it's an attraction, where job creators want to come here and employ our hardworking people. The way you fix this is you help folks in some of the areas to where if they want to go to school and get skill sets, if they want to go to college, chartered schools to where you can capture kids and help them kind of get a step ahead is the key thing. This is all about the economy. You can have the minimum wage go to $50 an hour, but if there's no jobs and people aren't wanting to come to this great state, that's the problem.
Let's go outside the borders for a moment and discuss the situation in the Middle East. The first, ISIS, the Islamic State. We've made some commitments militarily. How far should we go?
You know, you're talking to a person that actually has what I call skin in the game. I have a son that's out at Fort Bragg right now, serving in the United States Army. I think one of the key things that we have to do is if we're going to go anywhere, we need to have a game plan. We can't just, show on TV to where we're bombing empty buildings and vehicles driving down the road. I think most of the generals out there have said, look, in order for this to be effective, we have to have boots on the ground. Our country is war tired. We're talking years and years since 2001 that this has been going on. And, first we've got to defend America. That's the number one job of this government. We cannot be the police of the world. But at the same time, ISIS hates everything that we stand for. They're now beheading people, not only over there, but here in the United States of America. This is why it's so important to get our borders secured. The terrorists have been infiltrating the United States of America, and don't be fooled. There are folks here that want to do bad things to our country. So I think the key thing is that whatever we do, we have to have a stake to say, here's what we're going to do and here's what we want to do to accomplish. But until that happens, I don't think we can do anything until somebody says, here's the game plan, here's the path to victory.
We had boots on the ground in Iraq, and yet the Islamic State seems to be making progress in Iraq. Did our policy fail in Iraq?
Yeah, it definitely did. It's why the president, instead of maintaining a campaign promise of getting everybody out of there, we should have left 5,000 boots on the ground and this would not be happening. Also, back when the president of the United States declared that ISIS was a JV squad, that they were no real threat, now we're finding that they are a major threat, not only over there, but to our country as a whole. This is why I think what you have to do is you've got to listen to the experts, the generals that have been appointed by the president and others that actually are his people. When they're saying we've got to have boots on the ground, then let's see what the plan is and then make a decision from there. But, like I said, we're weary. I mean, we've lost a lot of men and women, and had this been set up the right way in Iraq, a lot of those Gold Star parents and families wouldn't be so upset had we came out of there in the right fashion, leaving 5,000 people to hold these people and let the Afghanis and the Iraqis get to where they could stand on their own. Look, I've been to Afghanistan. I've seen the good things that our people have done there. But the problem with Afghanistan and other countries over there is they have no rule of law. And until they have that, we can't do a whole lot of good. So it's a tough decision, but at the same time, you don't want them coming here to the United States of America starting to kill more of our people or beheading people like what they did just here recently.
Staying in the Middle East, let's talk about diplomacy. There's been an issue in the Middle East since 1948 or 47 when Israel was formed as a country. What's your position on the solution to the Palestinian-Israeli dispute?
The problem that we have over there is that we have some folks that believe that the Israelis are occupying their ground. And what they've been trying to do is to take more and more ground away from the Israelis. And if they're successful, like the president wanted to go back to, I believe it's 1967 lines that were there, that leaves about a 9-mile span across Israel, which means they will be desecrated. If you listen to the people over there that want to minimize their boundaries, they want to wipe Israel off the map. Israel is our only ally, really, if you think about it, over there, and I think that we need to stand with them. And, they've given up ground. When they give up markets over there, the outsiders come in and they turn it into places where they can shoot more rockets. Think about the United States of America. If we had somebody, say Mexico or one of the borders that join us, shelling us, hundreds, maybe thousands of times in the course of a week or a day, we wouldn't just stand by and take it. And I don't think Israel should just stand by and take it either. They need to be able to, and they have a right to defend themselves.
Let's turn to the question of immigration. We have about 11 million, give or take, citizens who are here, quote, illegally. Some people want to become citizens. It's a long process. Some people don't want to become citizens. We have children that are still continue to cross the border. What do you view as the solution to the immigration question?
The problem we've got, and if this were an easy fix, and this has always been a political football, is President Obama, along with the Democratic-held Senate and Democratic-held House of Representatives, would have fixed this when they held all three branches. What we have to do, it's quite simple, I believe, is we need to make it easier for people to become citizens, and we need to make it more difficult for them to be here illegally. The way I believe that we fix it, number one, is we have to have compassion as citizens. I mean, we all got here from our, immigrant ancestors. So I think there's a couple of ways you can do it. Is number one is some folks want to see not a huge big bill that nobody's going to read. They want to see it passed out step by step. For example, securing the border. Secure the border, because it's like if your car is leaking oil, you don't just keep dumping oil in. So you secure your border. That way we're in good shape there. We know who's here, and we know that we've stopped the bleeding of bad folks that are coming in. Secondly, what we have to do is we've got to figure out who is here. We've got a lot of good people that are here wanting to live the American dream. And I think that's so important for us to be compassionate towards those people. So what we do is the good players that are here, we assign them some type of a fine, and then we put them to the back of the line. I'm not for amnesty whatsoever, like my opponent. I think that what we've got to do is we penalize them, put them to the back of the line, and then let them come through the process. On the other hand, we've got a lot of these bad players that are here, and this is why it's so important to get people through the line and on their path to become a United States citizen. Is you've got bad players in there that are hurting little children, doing bad things to women, and the folks that are here illegally can't come out and report that because they're afraid that they'll be deported. So I think that would be a big deal to fix. We also need to, when people come here, I believe it's around 4 million of the illegals that are here, they came here legally, and they overstayed their visas. So what we need to do is like what other countries do, is we need to have an entry and an exit program. So when you come into the United States of America, you have, say, 6 months to be here. We fingerprint you, we take a picture of you, and then when you expire your visa, then we come and get you, just like they do in China and Japan and other countries. But I think we've got to make it easier. It makes no sense to have people have to wait to become a citizen of the United States of America to come here to live their dream and have to wait 8, 10, 12, 15 years to do that. That's just not, that's not American.
When you mentioned secure the border, how would you secure the border?
There's several different ways that we could do that. I believe the best way to do that would be securing it with our veterans that have come home and can't find work. We could put those folks to work securing our borders. They're already trained. The United States of America has invested a lot in those folks, and that would be one of the best ways to do that. If we don't secure our borders and bad people keep getting in here and infiltrating the United States of America, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, whether it's the economy and jobs and, people are trying to build a business and things like that, if we can't defend and protect our citizens, a lot of the issues that we talk about really don't matter. So that's why it's so important that the government does its job and secures the border, and we find out who's here, and if they're bad players, we get rid of them. If they are people that want to come here to live the American dream just like our ancestors did, by golly, we need to make sure that they can do that.
You mentioned your son is at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. So let's turn to veterans issues. in particular the VA. A lot of headlines regarding the Veterans Administration recently. What role should the VA be playing, and include in your answer how you're going to pay for that?
Yeah, the role that the VA, look, the VA is great. I'm glad that they're there for our veterans, but you know, the bill that just passed through the House after the huge scandals that came out here a few months back, you know, I knew in the 112th Congress that this was an issue, just dealing with my father, who served in the United States Army. But you know, the problem that we had is that you've got this big bureaucracy, ineffective, spends a lot of money, and what we've got to do is we've got to get to where we're running it as a business, and also running it to where when our men and women need some assistance or help, they're not having to wait 40, 50, 100 days, 6 months, and some are dying before they can get the service that they need and deserve. They've all, you know, paid a price by serving, and some paid the ultimate price, you know, by not making it back. But I think the key is to allow, exactly as my bill that I presented in the 112th and that just got passed into law, the main body of it here in the 113th Congress, is to allow for our veterans to go to any hospital, any doctor, any specialist across the United States of America. I mean, think about this for a minute. A member of Congress can go to the best facilities in the entire world. Why is that? But the people that defend our freedom have to go to the VA, which don't get me wrong, I'm glad the VA is there. I think what the VA should be focusing a little bit more on is the fact that we've got a lot of men and women coming back with PTSD. And they can't afford, when they're depressed and they're thinking bad things, to have to wait till next Wednesday to get their appointment. This is something that we have to do to make sure they're taken care of. Secondly, how to fund it. You know, the bill that I put together actually ends up saving the taxpayers millions and millions of dollars, because what you do is you streamline the process. You're not having to reimburse for the drive to the VA. They can go to their local doc or care provider. So long term, it saves, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. The key expense would be is to tie in your local facilities to the VA, and the technology today is phenomenal. I mean, what they can do is they can go to their local doc. The doctor can take and use the internet and shoot into your ear or your throat, send that to the VA, and they can see exactly what's going on and, you know exactly what the problem is, and then know if you need to come here or if the doc can do it, or if you need to see the local doctor or hospital. But you know, for people that have fought for our freedom, you know, I don't know if there's a price that you can put on that to be quite forward. And another thing that we have to be able to do is when our veterans, or the future veterans, the people that haven't even signed in yet, you know, is when we make a promise, we keep the promise, and we've got to let those future veterans know America is going to be here for you, just like you were here for us, defending our freedoms. You know, these are the folks that, you know, it's all volunteer. You know, just like my son and other people out there watching today, is their sons and daughters are out fighting for freedom. And, you know, by golly, when they come back home, they ought to know, hey, you know what? America's here for you.
Is there a funding method, if indeed this will cost more to operate the VA, is there a funding mechanism that you recommend?
The funding mechanism that I recommend is actually going to save us money. So it's going to actually take more debt away, you know, from this country, because once it gets put into place, you know, you're seeing the local doctor. They're already going and seeing the VAs. The only problem is now, you know, you're having to wait, you know, 2 weeks to, you know, 6 months to go see a doc. My bill, what it does, now currently the new bill needs to be tweaked, I believe, because it still has a 2-week wait period. If you have to wait longer than 2 weeks to get to the VA, then what happens, then you can go see your local doc or provider. I want to eliminate that, you know, and then have the VA be more focused in on the PTSD and some of the other issues that are there. But, you know, there is money set aside that gets funded to Department of Defense, to the VA, to make sure that, you know, if they need a little bit more, that we can make that happen. I mean, there's really not a price tag to put on it.
Turning to education, what role should the federal government play? We've seen Common Core. I think Common Core actually came out of a governor's recommendation, but what role does the federal government play in local education?
You know, I think the federal government should play a very minimum role in local education. Common Core, I'm totally against that. I know my opponent supports that, but what the Common Core will do is it will teach our children to be cogs rather than critical thinkers. And you know, you can't take, we've seen so many times that things come through with good intentions, but it's a complete disaster. And I think to put a bunch of bureaucrats and lobbyists in charge of our education system is completely wrong. I want to see the control be more on the local school districts, the parents, the teachers, not big government. I mean, no one can tell me anything that the federal government has come in to control and it's turned out to be a success. Look at Social Security, look at Medicare, look at, you know, across the board. Anything that the government is pretty much running is become a complete disaster. And if they come in and they control our education system, I believe it will become a complete disaster. And I think every person out there needs to really read in and study on Common Core and what the federal government wants to do with our kids.
Finally, let's turn to the news that has been most often on the air and in newspapers, and that is Ebola. What's your assessment of how the United States of America has handled the Ebola situation, and what should we do in the future?
I think the way it's been handled, I mean, a few weeks ago we were told that, look, it's not coming here to America, now it's here. I think that the experts don't know enough about it to be quite forward. I think what we need to do is the indirect flights. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you go from Africa to this country and then are able to fly into the United States of America, we need to be able to check you out. We need to make sure, you know, if you think about this for a minute, is that, you know, if you come from a foreign country and you're bringing, you know, fruits or vegetables or anything in, they ask you, you know, do you have any fruits or vegetables, or what have you brought, you know, home with you, so we can check it out. You know, I think it would be okay to say, okay, look at you came from Africa, you know, were you around anybody that could be affected with Ebola? One of the things that I found frustrating is just recently the naming of the Ebola czar. It's not a doctor. No, it's not an expert in the field. And I think it's really important that when we're going to have people out there that they need to be experts in. So I think we need to be testing people if we know that their original origin was from Africa or one of the countries that could be affected with Ebola. But I don't think it's as big of a deal as what some of the people out there try to make it.
And finally, I'll allow you some time just to discuss a topic that is of importance to you.
Sure. You know, one of the things we've seen a lot of ads out there, and, you know, you'd think that I woke up one day and said, you know, millionaires and billionaires don't have it good enough, and too many jobs here in the United States of America, let's ship some overseas. That's completely ridiculous. I was born and raised in the west end of Rock Island, you know, a working poor area, in the middle class. I've been successful in raising my own family in the middle class, and my main thing is that I think a lot of the people out there today in this country and in this district, you know, they're looking for just an opportunity. And if we can just give them that opportunity, you know, get things to where we can create more jobs and put more people back to work and help our working poor and middle class folks, that's what they're looking for, and I'm the guy I believe that can do that.
Former Congressman Bobby Schilling, thank you so much for being with us on that issue. The Republican candidate for the 17th District will be back in just a moment with the Democratic candidate, Cheri Bustos.